that this is a company that has no problems finding venture capital, finding financial sources, or bootstrapping their way from seed projects right on through, because each of those business leaders realize that they're building a region, and within that region they're building a cluster. So they invest in each other's business. How do I recreate that? The most successful public policy initiative we could have in Ontario is to somehow find out the DNA coding in the folks of Kitchener-Waterloo and imprint it on the brains of bankers in Toronto. I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, because there's a sense that they have all been successful. And if I had to put the Ontario regional communities at one end, I'd have Kitchener-Waterloo at one end as the highly collaborative model, agile, critical mass, shared development of clusters, understanding that finance and venture capital are knowledgeable parts and connected to that. You look at things that are created like Communitech, if you have a chance to go out there and see how one company almost has found that balance between intellectual property and open source sharing of knowledge that's transformational. They've got that tipping point balance. They share enough to invigorate and accelerate each other without losing their intellectual property and the value of it. It's an extraordinary cultural experience. And then I go to Kingston, where everything's being done right by the one large institution, but can't translate out. So those are the challenges that we have going forward, which means that a regulatory public policy model of anything that looks like industrial policy isn't going to work. So conferences like this now take on new meanings. Our relationship with Israel, for example, of which I am a huge fan, and I'm very proud of the Winnipeg bus that runs down through the streets of Beersheba, and you wonder why the heck there's a bus called Winnipeg that runs through the streets of Beersheba. Maybe I'll just close with that and leave you with that idea. But it's how do we do that? So how do we take the best of the Israeli model? And I look at water technology companies like Takadu, and how do we get synergies with Canadian companies like Oxygen and Xenon and Trojans? And how do we start to build virtual and connected clusters? How do we leverage each other's cultural knowledge about the success of these urban regions and build real and virtual platforms that allow us to better understand our culture, our values, and our way of working together? To set multinational objectives to build what my friend at University of Chicago wrote about, Saskia Sassen. She writes brilliantly about the fragmentation of the modern economy, that you have to understand the economy almost as a series of slices of pies, that every regional economy has a slice that somehow just fits in and is interdependent on other activities, different types of capital formulation, different cultures in that community, different access to markets, different geography, different kinds of things, but that if you look at that same fragment, you'll find that it fits in. And one of the things she discovered in commodities, which surprised me and I was off my radar, was the integration of the Sao Paulo economy and the Chicago economy. And she mapped that out and actually looked at people, capital flows, and development, which no one else had figured out, because we don't really look at ourselves as a hub and spoke network thing. We don't realize so much that our economies, as far as people and capital, which in an innovation economy is basic. And why is all that important? Because we're now in an innovation economy. Wealth has shifted fundamentally from production being the major source of wealth to innovation being the major source of wealth production. And every year that goes by, it becomes more true. And if I look at this region, and I'm sure if you look at your region, today 4 to 5 jobs that are being created in the GTA, just where we are right now, are jobs where people do nothing at all. They imagine, they finance, they create, they engineer, they design, they perform. They do all range of intellectual and artistic and scientific and engineering and financial activities, but they don't make a shoe and they don't make a car part. They may make a shoe better, they may make a car part better, and our competencies and our clusters aren't about manufacturing. We don't talk about a clean tech sector or even an auto sector. Why do we have clean technology in Ontario? Because in places like London, Ontario, because we have some of the best process engineers in the world. And if you go to Trojans and you say, why the heck are you guys so good? They will tell you they have the best process engineers in the world. Why in Winnipeg, which I became mayor, as it was depopulating, I had the highest per capita taxes and the highest debt in the country. I had to cut taxes every year I was mayor. I cut debt in half. I reduced the size of government by 20%. Did all kinds of things, massive investments in arts and culture and affordable housing. But I could hear the tumbleweeds and my best and brightest citizens rolling down towards Calgary and towards Edmonton as the banks moved and the oil came out of the ground. Great time to be a Manitoban. But it made my job easier because I then went to Boeing and said, why the heck is Boeing here? Why are you guys still here? Why is New Flyer Industries, that makes more buses than any other company in North America? Most Americans are taking Winnipeg-made buses to work if they take a bus to work. And it was all about advanced composite materials. There were 11 engineers at the University of Manitoba that knew more about this stuff, and they had the most innovative workforce where every line assembly person understood that part of their job and the excitement of their job was they were the guinea pigs. They were adopting all the new advanced, lighter, stronger materials that Boeing was using in its fuselage because it couldn't make its engines go faster or use less fuel. And then I realized that New Flyer had the same argument. They had to make buses lighter for an older population that could do that. And what I had was a cluster built around a competency of advanced composite materials, and that those scientists and those emerging companies were driving the big ones. I then realized that we had an invention strategy, not an innovation strategy. And that we had to get into sectors that were competencies. We had to build those. We had to find people like you. We have the Ontario Venture Capital Fund here. We have the Emerging Technology Funds. We're now looking at partnerships to kickstart venture capital in this province. We have a lot to learn from any who do that. But I always thought BlackBerry was a big international company because the technology was so brilliant. Well, it is brilliant. But lots of other people had it, and it struggled for 20 years. And, I often thought, well, I didn't think advanced composite materials, for example, had anything to do with this. This isn't a bus or a plane. But Mike Lazaridis tells me the big breakthrough was the compression and the advanced composite materials they discovered on how to compress lithium, make it light and thin so they could have the lightest, best battery. And that's what made this not have to be plugged into your car, every 5 minutes. And then what happened was, this was the invention, the innovation was, they went to Bell and they went to Rogers, and they said, this uses 6 to 8 times more minutes than a cell phone user. Well, if you're a Bell, please, everyone please, you will take your cell phones back for free. We'll give you one of these. And the great plans. I always love when you see movies now, they've got these people standing on statues, how they stood up against predatory pricing in their cell phone plan. I mean, I don't know if you ever see these movies, and if you go to a movie theater, they have these hysterically funny movies where they actually take young people and put them up and make them look like Greco-Roman statues and monuments because they fought the plan. I mean, there's a youth culture around getting the best deal, the Fidos, all of that, right? But they did that. And those companies, Bell and Rogers and Michael Lazaridis, had an innovation which was that these guys were going to be able to market his. So they took this technology and they kicked everyone's butt in the world because Bell created a market, because Bell, they figured out, had the greatest motivation for selling their technology. And they took it from being a very successful regional company to being a global company. And so when we talk about, and one of my drivers and one of the Premier's drivers is to move us from funding innovation to working with you to understand the entire life cycle of a technology or a product, that the transformation and the relationships, that are auto sectors, that are telephone and telecom carriers, that it's our ability to move technologies into innovation and have our car manufacturers not have to innovate only after we nationalize them after a recession and then have to sell them back. I mean, we should figure out a better innovation strategy than that, but that's what it seems to have taken to get American cars as good or better than Japanese cars. So this discussion is going on. In the next 3 months, we are writing an innovation strategy. We see this as globalized and connected. We will be doing things in life sciences and stem cell research and around brains with Israel and California. Many of you are probably aware of the partnerships after both Premier McGuinty and Prime Minister Harper have met with President Perez and President Netanyahu, and some of the extraordinary things that are going to come out of that. We have to share Israel's ability and our American friends' ability to do so much better at patents than we are and early stage seed companies. We would like to share with you what is one of the largest pools of undiscovered technology, innovation, process, health, and neurological and life sciences expertise, more emerging technologies here that we simply don't have the fund managers yet, nor the commercialization yet to harvest those rich fields. And as a country with a very small population that doesn't see itself as very nationalist because we have brown faces and black faces and yellow faces and red faces. I mean, you walk through my constituency, you can't define what a Canadian is, but we feel a passion for every country that you come from. We see ourselves as not citizens of a nationalist country, but almost an unnation. And we see ourselves in this country where people and ideas and capital are highly mobile, that human rights, civil society, connectivity, democracy, a healthy environment, great healthcare systems, and a more just society have to be the product and part of the motivation for a successful, prosperous economy. And we know all of our American, Israeli, Singapore friends, that most of you share those passions and those values. I know most of you are tremendously proud that most of us have come from generations that suffered through Holocaust, war, and famine to come and create these new and emerging nations. And that we have inherited from a generation that had so very little and sacrificed so very much so that we could have this extraordinary level of education, health, civil liberties, technology, and prosperity. And from a nation and from a generation that gave us so much from so little. We are poised with a really fundamental question that should be at the bottom line of every decision. As we look at our wallets, we also need to look at our children. We have to how we repurpose some of our energy to leave them a healthy planet, a prosperous economy, more civil liberties, less racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, sexism, and homophobia than previous generations have, where the world and openness for entrepreneurs and the celebration of the diversity of ideas and entrepreneurship is also a celebration of the diversity of our faiths, our identities, our cultures, and our races. And there is a great human journey here that I think is extraordinary. And we are not yet leaving the kind of legacy we owe our children. We are not yet there. I'm hoping that your leadership, because our economy is the way we pay for this, and the way we maintain our healthcare system, that you will be partners in that. Thank you so much. God bless. Keep you safe. I appreciate your time.